Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our second youth policy debate um, about heritage and local communities. I'm Serena Nakshi, and I'm really glad to give you a brief welcome to this online meeting of ours. I'm very sorry in advance for any background noises, but I really wanted to say hello. Just before my colleague Elif will get into the theme of the debate and the house rules and everything regarding today's event, I just wanted to also briefly mention the fact that, as most of you already know, we've recently transformed from the European Students Association for Cultural Heritage into Youth.Heritage.Europe. And because of this immense transformation and happy occasion, I would also like to let you know that you are most welcome to join us. We have at least two membership options, and there's no better opportunity for me than to promote this fact right now. And you can already see the link in the chat for this, and I'm just wishing you good luck with this conversation, and really looking forward to the results and further communication. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sorina, and hello, everyone. As you might know, I'm Elif Aydın. I'm part of Youth Heritage Europe team, and thank you all for being here today. As you already know, today's focus will be on one of Hub's key 10 themes, heritage and local communities. We chose this theme because of its growing importance on fostering inclusive, sustainable, and community-driven approaches to the heritage management, cultural heritage management, and we thought that it is a good opportunity for us to discuss this all together through a youth perspective. And today's debate will be framed around several key aspects, and these key aspects, of course, according to our speakers' own areas of expertise, and these will be including on community engagement, public and private cooperation, and the educational dimension of on heritage. And of course, this all will be explored through a youth perspective. And today we have an excellent group of speakers. And first of all, Marco Coico from Italy, from Le Vie de Tesori. And we have NextGen Heritage Ambassador, Atakan Budakçı, a researcher. He's from Turkey, but based in Brussels at Culture Solutions. And Joshua Davis, a researcher, also based in Brussels, but from Australia. And he's a researcher at Leuven and at the European Heritage Hub. Unfortunately, our fourth speaker, Nikolina Dordovic, she's a student from Serbia and another NextGen Heritage Ambassador. She cannot be here today due to some health issues. And to give you a brief overview of how the session will proceed, we will begin with an introductory remarks from each of our speakers, and following that, we will move into a more interactive discussion shaped by the questions you already shared with us through our social media. And finally, we will have some time for Q&A session at the end. And now, without further ado, I would like to give floor to Joshua, who will start us off with some remarks on Hub's perspective. Joshua, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Elif, and thank you, organizers as well. Thank you, Serena. And as we're discussing here today, it's about policies. So I'm going to be speaking to in a capacity, particularly in the work with have to think about essentially who gives the authority and how can these actions occur, particularly when it comes to heritage. So in the case of the European Union, culture, and by extension, cultural heritage, is a supporting competence of the EU. So what that means is the EU cannot act directly to set the policies in the member states. It can support the member states, but it cannot essentially create its own policies. So this, the thinking behind this is that cultural policy should follow the principles So what's that It actually isn't. It's due to the fact that there are particularly the EU treaties, and there's Article 1674 of the Treaty of the Functioning of the European Union. There's a paragraph within that, paragraph 4, which allows for cultural heritage policies to be included in other policies of the EU. So whenever you hear about cultural heritage in digital, cultural heritage in youth, cultural heritage in the green transition, cultural heritage and enlargement, this is the insertion of cultural heritage into other policies. And that in particular this is the legal basis for the work which is done in the European Heritage Hub with the policy research and also follow you.
Joshua, I think there is a problem with the voice right now. We cannot hear you very clearly.
Okay, can you hear me now?
No,
Is that better?
not
Okay, one second. Is that better?
Yeah, now it is better.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
So this is the legal principle which is behind this. And this is what I'm going to be talking about today. So within the European Heritage Hub Policy Monitor, we had policy reviews and policy papers.
Elif, sorry, I think it's a connection issue. So I don't think it's an audio problem. I think it's a connection issue.
Yes, I think so. The same, yes, because it is still giving some errors.
Is it working now?
For now, yes.
Okay. So this is the policy which going forward, we have the digital policies and the digital transition, and particularly what was found that there's a cultural heritage is deeply relevant to green legislation, where legislatures do not draw explicit links, and heritage policy experts should be included in the green policy debates. This is being done by several Nordic countries which already manage cultural and natural heritage. Moreover, when we've done work as well on the
Joshua,
alignment
sorry,
and the
we're not catching you. There's a problem with the connection. So
Can you
maybe
hear me now?
if you can reestablish the connection.
Can you hear me now?
It's cutting out sometimes. We can hear you now. It's
Okay.
cutting out a little bit. Maybe if you turn off your video, or can you reestablish with a different connection?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
sure. Local initiatives. And the review identifies a critical gap, and there are no systematic mechanisms to scale, replicate, or mainstream successful local approaches. And also when it comes to the green paper, particularly for local communities and local levels, cultural heritage aspects do need to be more included as well. And particularly what needs to be done is a pathway moving forward that integrates cultural overall. And this is similar in the case where the work we have done on European identities as well in that cultural heritage and this one is
Sorry,
something which
Joshua,
can create cohesion.
you're still breaking up. You're still breaking up. We can't hear you. Okay. Maybe
Hear
he'll
me
try to
now?
reconnect. We can hear
Is it
you,
okay
yes.
now?
If you want,
Okay.
we can continue now with first Marco, and then meanwhile you can try to solve it, and then
Sure.
we can continue with you if
Sounds
it is
good.
okay for you.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay, then. But before moving to Marco, I would like to ask for a group photo if Joshua is still with us here. No, then after Marco, we will do that before Joshua. Marco, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Elif. Thank you, everyone, for this valuable opportunity, for this invitation. It's a pleasure for me to be once again with you all. Today's topic is quite relevant for all of us, I guess, who are cultural stakeholders, operators, professionals, as well for anyone who is following both live and the recorded debate session. My experience, which I will tell you about, is quite relevant because over my path, over my career, I had opportunity to both research and discover and implement, let's say, good practices and good models, both for the improvement of how cultural operators, how cultural organizations can work more easily within the framework of collaboration of policies, of course. And because my professional experience comes from the activity within a non-profit, non-governmental foundation, which is called Le Vie dei Tesori Foundation. It was born 20 years ago in Palermo, in southern Italy, in a context where there's a strong and very solid, let's say, framework from the point of view of lawmaking processes on the let's say lawmaking tradition on cultural heritage. But this solid framework often crashes into a reality and a variety of cultural organizations of subjects who are often really fragmentized, let's say fragmented. And that's where working from the bottom up within the sector can help us build and share new good practices. That's my starting point.
Thank you so much. And before moving to Joshua again, I would like to ask anyone to join to group photo. Please open your cameras, and then I will have a screenshot. Yes, waiting for everyone to open. Yes. 1, 2, 3. Thank you, everyone. And now we can continue with Joshua. Is the connection right now, is it working? Maybe you can continue while turning off your video, and we can listen your voice, and that might be a bit help the connection better.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So just coming towards the conclusion essentially, and I apologize for the breaking up with this. But also, I wanted to add into that as well as I was talking about that the theme overall is that cultural heritage is included in other policies. And this is what I encourage everyone who's working in this sphere to very much think about if it's not just cultural heritage itself directly, but it's also how you insert cultural heritage into something else. So cultural heritage is a vector in the digital sphere, the green sphere, and it's also with social cohesion, but also is international relations. So which relations outside and it's worldwide. So that does not limit itself to development policy, but it's also partnership work as well. And the EU has a full toolbox that can be used: legal authority, multilateral credibility, institution delegates, and civil society networks, all of which can position cultural heritage to become a defining signature of EU external action. Not only is this worldwide, but it's also within the EU's neighborhood as well, and even internally too, and inserting it into regional policies and agricultural policies, which means that cultural heritage can go to the deepest rural areas of Europe and also in Europe's neighborhood as well and worldwide. So what was found by the European Heritage Hub, particularly through the policy monitor, but also the policy reviews and its associated papers, is cultural heritage is a cross-cutting policy asset. It's relevant to the digital transition, the great governance and a lack of systemic mechanisms for scaling local success, partly due to the cultural heritage being a supporting competence. So effective progress requires embedding cultural heritage explicitly within binding EU frameworks, investing in local and regional capacity, and using tools like the policy monitor to track, compare, and maintain and mainstream the innovative practices already being developed by communities, cities, and civil societies across Europe. So that's what I encourage everyone working in the sector to see: be creative, be inventive, be innovative, and you see any policy anywhere and you see how can cultural heritage make this policy better. So, and I just give one final example on this. A paper which was done by the European Heritage Hub included the use of agriculture in regional policies, and that did demonstrate that when it's linked to funding, cultural heritage did increase rural outputs and economic success in agrarian areas. So please, if you're in a cultural heritage sector and you feel like there's a blockage, you don't know what to do with it, be creative and see, can cultural heritage be somewhere? Because it can be in absolutely anything. The legal authority is there, the funding's there. Please get involved. Thank
Thank you, Joshua, for the starting remarks. And right now, I think we can continue with Atakan for his general remarks. Atakan, the floor is yours now.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. First of all, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Elif. And for me, actually, it is also similar to what Marco said, because I also want to take this discussion from the governance perspective, and I would like to focus on who's making the decision and how is that affecting the community. So because we always talk about participation, but in many cases the participation stays quite symbolic, and even though the communities are included in this in the process, they're not always taking part in the decision making process, let's say. So that's why the issue is not just participation, but also the question, the big question is just actually who has the power. So that's why also my main idea, just like Marco has said, is shifting from top down to more bottom up and grassroots approaches. And that's why switching to that, communities can be more consulted, but also apart being consulted, they can also get involved in shaping the decisions in the decision making process. Because otherwise, if we don't include the local communities in this situation, in this process, we can become disconnected from local realities as well. And actually, if we get disconnected from local realities, if we get away from that, I think we might have the risk of losing the meaning of heritage, because it always starts and also ends within the local communities. Uh, Also, another part that I want to talk is that the risks of it, the risks of getting away from local communities and heritage. And through my research, through my work, let's say, uh, one of the main concerns is that the risk of instrumentalization of cultural heritage, especially with youth participation as well, because in like it is really prone to like, let's say being used in national agendas and political agendas, especially in, let's say, populist governments or far-right governments. So like if we let if we let heritage get distant from local realities, we might have these risks, and that can raise the questions of ownership and representation of heritage. And also, like, of course, like there's also the good parts of it. Let's say like it also, like, cultural heritage also like strengthens belonging, and it can support collective memory, which especially like creates spaces for dialogue, which is the most important thing about cultural heritage, I guess. And also it helps like the minorities or like marginalized groups to take part in this kind of decisions as well. So as long as it's like supported by local groups, local communities, it can create spaces for dialogue, and it can be more inclusive. So like that's why the key, like the biggest question is that like not like how like the communities participate, but also like what can they do? Like what's the power? Like what, like do they really have the power to shape it? So I guess that like we will discuss it today. So thank you so much.
Thank you for your inputs, and all what you said, three of you, is bringing me to my first question to start the debate, to be honest. And as I understand, you are mentioning the failing part of the existing framework for community engagement and heritage management. I think it is the creating this platform for dialogue, and this moving this dialogue from from substantive negotiation to having the equal platform, equal power on decision making. So my question is how we can fill this existing critical policy gap with effective and inclusive cultural heritage management, and how we can move beyond this symbolic participation to substantive negotiation on this decision making to empower local communities. So I think we can start with Marco, Atakan, and then Joshua. We can continue with this queue. And Marco, let's start with you.
Yeah, of course. I would say, since we're already, let's say, sailing on a double track, which is the one of heritage management, and the other one is the community's involvement. Let's say the link with the real world, the link with people, with the real beneficiaries of culture, which is not only us experts. I would say that the gap is double, because there's not only in the public sector a mere policy gap, there's a vision gap very often. And we can see it clearly even in let's say, mature like states, countries within the cultural sector, as Italy could be. Because we often see for the self-appreciation of politicians, of high-ranking country public officers of the cultural sector, we often see big investments in big national museums, in the mega exhibition, let's say, on the big national exhibitions, but then, or even on conferences, on events, which often leave little trace behind. So the real thing is that very often, unfortunately, who drives the top-down cultural processings and cultural initiatives doesn't have the real link with the territories, with the communities. And it really often ends up into a cultural elite that talks to itself. That's what happens in university with knowledge in general, and that's also happens with culture. So the first gap to fill is the vision gap, is that we need processes, we need countries and public institutions that are able to listen, to let's say align the frequency of their radars, of their ears, to the local communities, to citizens, to say stakeholders of every kind, both little public institutions, but also, and more most importantly, private non-profit institutions that are often born from the civil society. And then what the public can really do to incentivize, to smoothen the cultural processes that were born from the people, from civil society, are to incentivize them, to support them, to give them the tools, and not only the funding tools. As Joshua brilliantly said, the funding is not missing. He said a sentence very close to that, and that's true. We know how much funding the EU grants for cultural projects, but there really is a vision gap to fill, and then the policy gap is subsequent. I would say that the first link to fill would be a real bridge with people, with the civil society, with museums that have in mind the people they talk to, so citizens, not experts. Public institutions which can give grants to associations which start from the needs of people, to make, in a few words, culture arrive to the streets. That's what my experience with the festival I work on has demonstrated. I work for a festival, I co-organize a festival that is now at its 20th edition, and that transforms cities into open-air museums, let's say. So by creating a network of public and private entities to create a network of them, and then making a cultural offer which is homogeneous to the public, because let's say it, a visitor, a tourist, a citizen does not care if a monument, if heritage is owned and managed by the municipality, by the state, by a local authority, or by the diocese, or by a private owner. We should really get into the eyes of visitors and then start from scratch from there. So that's really, and then the policy change will arrive naturally, as I can say in Italy has happened over the past 10 years.
Very good point. Vision change will bring the policy change itself automatically. Yes, I agree with that. And Atakan, how would you comment on this?
I mean, yeah, absolutely, I agree with Marco, but also like an additional gap I would put there is just like, I don't know how can I say it, but like maybe the scheduling gap, or like, because like things don't like become sustainable enough, so that like there's the will, there's the fun, but it is not sustainable. Like it can always, like, like just from my experience, like let's say I'm from Turkey, so like the experience I can give, like the experience I had here, like there's the will, people want it, but like it doesn't continue later. We just like, it happens once and we just forget it. Like we just talk about like, okay, like it was great, it was like perfect, blah blah blah. But then in the end, like it just doesn't continue for the rest of the like year or like the another time. So like I think the biggest gap could be like the not being sustainable, the sustainable part. So like I just want to say like in a short answer, like the gap of scheduling, I guess. I don't know.
Keeping the consistency, I think
Yeah.
it might be. And do you have any policy suggestions on policy approaches to keep this consistency, to enhance local community autonomy, or shifting from participatory models, like I said, to more substantive negotiation for decision making? And yeah. And yes, and Joshua, maybe then afterwards you can bring your point of view on which level this can be addressed on both local, national, and EU level.
Thank you, Elif, and thank you, Atakan and Marco. And just to build on your comments here, and also just as what I was mentioning about the cultural competence as well for cultural heritage, because cultural heritage is going to be something which will always be with the member states and with the local authorities. By its very nature, it will have an over-reliance on ad hoc or context-specific successes rather than systematic governance models. So this means a fragmentation of policy approaches across those levels, local, regional, national, and EU, And this also leads to a lack of institutionalized mechanisms to scale and replicate successful local initiatives into the national and EU policy frameworks. And so what this means is that the models will not be integrated unless local people want to copy someone else's successful model. And there's going to be limited integration of local knowledge into formal decision-making structures unless the local authorities want to do that, along with an insufficient alignment between the policy design and the implementation realities on the ground. So what is essential to solve this is that the cultural heritage sector has to be the driving force behind integration and finding best practice. It's not going to come from the institutions because it's legally impossible for them to do that. So the cultural heritage sector has to be the driver for this. And what I want to add to that is it doesn't necessarily mean it might be a challenge, but it's actually an opportunity here. So it means that the cultural heritage sector, if it is integrated, if work is done on policies to create integrative best practices that can be replicated, the sector itself will be in the driver's seat rather than a bureaucrat who is tasked with that instead. So don't see this as a problem, see this as an opportunity. Cultural heritage sector can fill that gap. It can be done and it can be solved.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. And I would like to ask if you have, any of you has some kind of, suggestion to how to, go further from this problem to make it as an opportunity, as might be a policy suggestion approach, a suggestion on policy approach, or any kind of priority areas for the projects that we are all working on. Any of you? Marco, Atakan? No?
Yeah, Atakan, if you wish first.
You or yeah.
Okay, while we were talking, an idea came to my mind, since I think it's useful to gather and to share some real life, let's say, examples, because I wondered, okay, specifically what policy gaps can be filled, what frameworks can be fixed, especially on the policy, on the lawmaking side. And I don't know if you read it, but it's recent news that in March, so last month, the EU finally finalized a kind of, let's say, of operating organization of profit subjects we're talking about in this case, which is the so-called European Society, the EU Inc., which is a new kind of company, let's say. This is an example from the for-profit world, of course, but which is finally the, let's say, the final product of EU cohesion on the trade side, because now any EU citizen can create their own EU company, which does not follow the single national laws, but it's a transversal, let's say, homogeneous kind of incorporated kind of company. And I challenge all of us to think if also in the non-profit sector, which is where usually cultural organizations move around, if there could be, let's say, a kind of European transversal, homogeneous, non-profit kind of organization, which goes over the single associations, foundations, cooperatives kind of categorizations. I mentioned some of the Italian ones, but I guess it's kind of the same all across the EU. So maybe this would not be directly or immediately useful within the single country of the EU, but let's think of Europe in a wide sense, with a wide meaning, not only the states of the EU literally, but how can a group of many nations impact and innovate the non-profit and the cultural sector by having just one kind of accessible and easily manageable, let's say, kind of organization, of non-profit entity. Entity is the right word. And then I can share with you a case from the Italian side, but it's I mean the dynamics, the phenomenology, let's say, is the same in any country. Where very often our policy framework allows the state, the public, to open up to private, to civil society organizations for the management of cultural heritage, for the promotion of cultural heritage. But this has often been done for, let's say, the Kafkian transparency rules, so the jure, procedures. It has often been done with the procedure of the so-called concessione, which we could translate to concession or license. So a municipality or a local or national entity can share with a non-profit, with a cultural or creative organization, some tasks, some missions of its cultural heritage, of cultural activities, but it has often been done with very slow and, of course, law-abiding, transparency-abiding procedures that, as we perfectly know as cultural experts, as cultural operators, totally are not at all aligned with the rhythms, with the dynamics, with the trends, with the speed at which we cultural stakeholders work at. And so, as you can imagine, this procedure often wants the public entity to open up an open call, then a long period of time for the civil society to apply, to participate in the cultural processes, and then the results are often given and shared with the private stakeholders after a very long time. That's in some way also what happens with the EU grants for cultural projects. While a new way to see it, both with the relationship with the public administrations, but also as a way to work also with EU funding, let's say, with transnational projects, could be a switch to, let's call it, to a trust-based model, which is a thing that has started to come up in the philanthropy sector, where the cultural actors, the cultural organizations are valued and appreciated for the trust and for the reputation they are able to build. And according to that, also a public entity can entrust them with support, with money, also in the most practical sense. And so in that direction, there's a thing in Italy, a new thing in several European countries called it's an acronym which is basically special public-private partnership. That's the acronym PSPP in Italian, and it's really a new way and a much more agile way, thanks to which the public administration, which is in our country is often the owner, the first manager of cultural heritage, how it can multiply and share, let's say, its processes, its actions, and how we can fasten up let's say, the way to reach the objectives of the cultural mission that we all have in the EU, both as citizens and as countries. So moving from a very solid but also slow scheme of thinking and acting to a trust-based, plural and transversal way of managing assets, money, and activities, initiatives.
Thank you. And Atakan or Joshua, would you like to add something on this? Or
Yes. So I just want to quickly just echo what Marco has said. Marco's gone into very good detail on this, and probably what I would like to say is that when there's a lack essentially of formalized co-governance structures which embed that community authority, and that means that the community input is going to be frequently non-binding and non-systematic. It's very much on a case-by-case basis. So the participation is often consultative rather than decision-making in nature, which tends to happen when you don't have a clear structure. And the influence of communities hands-on institutional to make this. Instead, it will just be done improvised, essentially, on a case-by-case basis. And that highlights power asymmetrics between the state actors and the local communities, and these remain largely intact. It's particularly problematic for cultural heritage, but it does mean that there will be just a move towards symbolic participation rather than genuine power sharing, if that's the case. So I think that that's really what I want to say, and just echoes what Marco's been saying, really.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And Atakan, you, would you like to add, or should we move on to next
Yeah,
question?
move to the next question. Yeah.
Okay. And then my next question will be on in what ways do you think youth can help this process to move beyond the consultation to actively shaping and leading the decision-making process? What kind of structural barriers there are there for youth that facing throughout this process? And yes, Marco, I think you can start, or Atakan.
Atakan first, if you wish, so we can switch the order.
However you wish. I mean,
Atakan, you go.
okay. So the first thing comes to mind is that like being organized, because otherwise like it's impossible for us to change something as individuals, like sadly. I mean, don't get me wrong, but yeah, is to be organized, but also like to move beyond the barriers that like that is set, let's say in certain contexts, certain places, let's say that the barriers of um like the privileged like more privileged people. So like let's say like the youth has to like overcome the barriers of that by being organized and by being vocal and by being represented. And sadly, like it is also in our hands because like it's not easy. Especially let's say in my case, like from where I'm from, that we have to create our opportunities to represent ourselves and to make our voices be heard. And that's why like the main thing is that to be organized, to be vocal, to be like to by doing this like to create awareness. It is just the beginning of it, and the rest will follow, of course. But yeah, I would just like the shortest answer is just to be organized. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I can agree with that. Being organized always the first step, and I think that was when you don't have the experience and the network to help you to shape your road. I think it is being the biggest challenge at the beginning of this process, I think. And Marco?
Yeah, I totally embrace and support what Atakan and you, Elif, are saying, because it's a matter of being organized not only in the literal sense, but also we, the young people, should think, even when we are at high school, when we are at university, we should think in an organized and professional way as if we were already adults and professionals. The only way to get into the perspective, to get into, let's say, the accountability of being a professional in the cultural sector while being young is thinking like a person who does it seriously, who does it in an organized way. So the mindset, the vision is of fundamental importance. And then, of course, organizing ourselves with organizations, with frameworks, with talks, with opportunities to make us gather around and to work on real things, on something real. And then I really optimistically see that with even before getting to the barrier, because there's of course a generational barrier, a generational challenge, let's say. But I also like to think that we, the young people, are much more prone to action, much more prone to doing really the things that we want to be implemented, that the things we want to have an impact on the world. We're also, I like to think, less prone to corruption because of a new ethics, because of new ethics that we embrace, because of new way of thinking, the res publica, the public thing, because of the new way we think about work, about being professionals, about being together. These opportunities of us coming from many countries of the world. It's not only about the European countries, but really we're almost from all around the world, and getting together to speak, to talk about cultural heritage and new policies, new management is really something that we as a generation are very lucky to be able to do. And so less corruption, more to be more prone, inclined to action. And then when finally, and then we get to the barrier, to the challenge, because we know that the places of power, most of all in the public entities, are held by usually men, middle-aged men, linked with politics, linked with power, linked with, let's say, the power. I would like to find a way to say it in English, a way that power has linked people to the chair, to the sofa, by also making the mold within some people who gather the power. We are here to substitute not only those people but also that way of thinking as soon as possible. And that's maybe why the trust-based model on culture, with the relationship with between public and private, can work with our generation. Imagine how cool a future would be with us not needing to apply to grants of the EU, which after 2 or 3 years expire, and we, as it's right now, always have to invent something new to meet the requirements of grants, of EU projects, of programs. How cool would it be if we, as accountable and serious and action-prone young heritage professionals, how cool it would be if we could just receive the support, the institutional, the economic, the financial support, but also the networking support. If we just came up with a good idea and with the accountability, with the reputation of us being in a network who ethically wants to make culture, to do things in culture.
Thank you.
But future will tell us. We are here to see.
That is true. That is true. And so since we have quite limited time and we want to keep the time for the Q&A session as well, I would like to ask you first our speakers, Marco, Atakan, and then Joshua, to give the latest last remarks. Do you want to highlight anything, Atakan and Marco, as last words, and then we can continue with Joshua for closing remarks for the discussion and debate itself, and then we will continue with Q&A session.
Just a short remark from my side is just like, first of all, thank you so much, Marco. It was an amazing talk from you, and I completely agree with all the things you said. But like as a closing remark, I would like to say that like as youth, we have to be careful. Like what are we facing with? We have to be more vocal, but also we have to be more careful. What are we consuming in the media, or like in like anywhere, like in social media, or like in media, like that the things that that we like face about cultural heritage can be sometimes misleading, and we have to stick to what we know, what we believe, and do not get influenced by the ones that wants to utilize to the instrumentalize cultural heritage. I think that's one of the core issues that I want to tell. And of course, we have to be more prone to dialogue, to create spaces for dialogue, using like the great benefit of culture and cultural heritage. That we have to be open to dialogue and be open to understand each other better. So, I mean, it will be simple, but like just to have a better future, let's say. So, this will be my closing remark, and thank you so much.
Marco?
Yes, thank you, Elif. Thank you, Atakan, and I really support what you said. I already talked too much, so the only two things that I would share with you are, one is technical, one is symbolic, one is of meaning. The technical advice, the technical point which I would share is, we talked about funding, about grants, about the EU who often supports us, but let's try to think, that's what my model of working, what my real model of working is. Let's try to think to making cultural activities and to working on cultural heritage in a way that your audience would pay directly and totally for you. So let's not think about a cultural project that the EU or someone else grants a funding for, but let's try to think about our way of working in culture in a way that the direct beneficiaries, so often the visitors, the participants if we do workshops, the spectators if we do theater activities, are wanting to pay for what we do. That's a model, a business model that survives to everything. And the other point, the point of meaning, which starts from what Atakan said, is that luckily now today we have the lenses to read cultural heritage in a way that it's not something that says you can be part of it, you cannot. Cultural heritage, once it was interpreted and instrumentalized, we can say it, by people who use cultural heritage to say we are in, you are out, this represents us, not you. Luckily today we have the chance to, as the Faro Convention, as it's written on the Faro Convention, we have the luck to use and to perceive cultural heritage as something that we, with our background, with our education, with our thoughts, with our ideas, if we feel it, we can feel part of it, we can recognize itself in cultural heritage or in some portions of it. So that's a very lucky moment to live in. Of course, that's not to give for granted. So the vision that we and I, first of all, should live by following by is that cultural heritage is for everyone, and anyone who feels involved can and must be part of it.
Thank you. Thank you for both of you for your inputs. And now I would like to give the floor to Joshua for his closing remarks on this whole discussion we had today. Joshua?
Thank you, Elif, sir, and also thank you to Marco and thank you to Atakan for your remarks. And I just want to build on what all of you have said here. So we've seen here probably that you've noticed that the decision-making models are not necessarily ones that are placed with local communities, and also that there is not a harmonization within. When you hear that word participatory governance, participatory is a word that is very much open to interpretation, and it could mean someone participating in the co-decision process, but participation could also be seeing someone as a stakeholder in a consultative process. So that is a decision's made, and then they say, what do you think about this, with a survey or something like that? But it's at the discretion of the decision maker on whether they listen to that or not. But you've still participated if you participate in that process. So what I'd like everyone to think about here is that whilst you might feel that there's the youth level that you're coming up to it, there's two aspects this is important. You're not that far away from the professional sector. You're probably maybe one budget round away from working in that field or being promoted in that field. So it's actually very, very something that's going to be very imminent for all of you. But secondly, you're not going to be able to change the governance models for this too. So if someone's being elected in a local authority, they'll already consider that any decision that's been made or a national and EU level, that it is a democratic process. So you're not necessarily going to be able to change that. So what I do encourage people is to think that it is good to change, but that until you get to that point, find other opportunities. And this is probably what I would like everyone to think about when you're looking into the cultural heritage sector. Think about where cultural heritage can add value to another policy area. And this is following the EU competence process. So don't just think we're doing just cultural heritage. If you're doing something like the green or environmental aspects, digital aspects, it could even be road development, highways, it could be education, it could be any policy. Find a niche and think, how will cultural heritage make the outcomes of this better? Economic development, social inclusion. And what you will find is that cultural heritage can be added to every single one of those policies. And moreover, it follows the EU's legal model of inserting cultural heritage pursuant to Article 167.4 TFEU, that you include cultural heritage into another policy aspect. So don't feel disheartened by you can't be participatory in that. Instead, push for something for cultural heritage in something else. And that will be a transformative approach, and you'll integrate the legal empowerment, the financial funding for this, and also you'll be able to bypass issues of institutional reform, and you'll still be able to make change. So within those parameters, there's opportunities for you. You're very close to working in the sector, and just find yourself a niche of cultural heritage with something else. Absolutely anything. And it will make that policy better and cultural heritage better by extension. So that's my final thoughts for you. And thank you to all.
Thank you, Joshua, for wrapping up it perfectly. And now I would like to open the floor for our audience. And if you have any questions or any kind of inputs that you want to provide, please raise your hand and go for it. Anyone willing to ask anything or say something?
Okay, I want to ask something if it's okay.
Yes,
I don't
and
know who was first. I think someone else also tried to talk.
yes, Serena, I think Serena, we can start with you. Yes.
Sorry?
Yeah, we can start with you, I think.
Okay, perfect. It's any sound problem. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Been listening to all the speakers, and it's actually just a pleasure to have all the insights. I took some notes, but first of all, I will present myself. So I'm a local development agent at the local action group in Southwestern Sardinia, and I'm a PhD fellow in research and social innovation at the University of Cagliari. So that's why I said that, because I got so many insights from all the speeches. Well, part of my job is actually to be the territorial animator and try to animate communities to participate to our strategy, which is basically a document that explain the next steps, all the activities we will do in our work, since we manage European structural funds. And having said that, yes, I completely agree to what have been said by Joshua, I think, and Marco. Well, the problem is not funds at all. There are several funds that actually would like to do projects, develop activities, but no, as Marco said, yeah, sometimes the problem is the vision. Of course, trying to how that to try to find the best way. To engage communities and let them do the best activity for them. Try to to not have symbolic participation, as Atakan said, and try to, of course, avoid one model fits all, or try to develop, let's say, place-based solutions. One concept I would like to add is one concept that my director, that has a lot more experience than me, is the concept of co-responsibility. I mean, we should allow all the people to participate with all the means, instruments, and possibility they have, but we should not forget that is also their responsibility to act. I mean, we should not underestimate local communities in this sense. I mean, we should give them the responsibility to do what they do, what they can do to this. Of course, in heritage, but also in other type of typological projects. Another thing I thought is also to try to, as professionals, as young professional, but professional in general, we should act with empathy. I mean, this is what we have been talking in my office in the latest days, that the thing we should have empathy and try to understand that when we are talking about communities, about people, we are requiring them time, energies. So we should really use our empathy to work with communities. And yes, exactly. When we thought, when they were talking about fragmentation of policies, yes, I guess. I mean, when especially researcher can see that, all the steps from communities to papers or academic articles, and then policies. Actually, again, we should not underestimate what we can really do in a territory, if we can say. And yes, I guess I try to cover all the insights I got. I hope. I mean, I don't really have any questions. I really agree with everything you have said, and yes, I think it was useful for me also to rethink my own job, to again take care of all the action I can do as young professional, and as a even as a person, as a voluntary, we kind of do have some power, so it's good to be able to use it. And again, as professional, always remember that maybe we are in a kind of position of power, and it's useful to use it the best way we can. I don't know.
Yes, thank you.
And yeah, thank you for all the team for this. Okay.
Thank you. It's really, I mean, it's not always having the question, but reminding ourselves that there is a possibility, and then we already did and achieved this at some extent, and it was a good reminder also with your remarks. And anyone else? I think it was Luca who wanted to ask question. Am I wrong?
Yes, you're
Yes,
correct.
go for it.
So I wanted to ask in general, not to anyone particularly, but I was curious because I think there was a mention of transferring ownership to local communities when it comes to cultural heritage sites. And I wanted to ask about, like, how do you feel about that? Considering it sounds like the right approach when it comes to allowing the local community to manage the heritage sites that directly affect them through tourism or economy, as was mentioned before. However, what if the case is such as the local community does not have enough resources to properly manage the heritage sites? I wanted to know if there was any kind of balance or any kind of solution to allowing the community to be more in charge of the heritage that is close to them, while also maintaining the availability of resources to properly manage it.
Who wants to go for it?
Yes, I can help with answering that. So when people say ownership, it's more of a co-ownership model. So it's still the local community is not going to have the power to draw on funds or fund it itself or find donors for something like that. But in many cases, there already is co-ownership models. So it's just about a co-decision making process to have more involvement. And it's a move away from when they say co-decision. It's a move away from a consultative process to have more agenda setting within. So it's not going to be entirely ownership because you're right in that in suggesting that it's who funds it and also who manages it, who maintains it too. So it's more of a co-ownership model that they're proposing.
Okay, I want to add on to that. Considering I come from Montenegro, and I believe that a lot of these topics are already, well, I want to make it sound weird or wrong in any way, but I think it relies a lot on the given, so to say, that the community and the government can function properly. For example, in Montenegro, if there was any kind of co-ownership, the government would not do anything from its own part. I know that for sure. And I know that anything that is in the government's ownership is completely mismanaged or even desolate, left to ruin. So that's why I'm asking in a bit more of a particular scenario, I guess, considering my background. Because I am aware, for example, and I also have not, of course, apart from the very rural sites that may not get enough attention, but whenever I went traveling in any countries in Europe, I was always looking at very well-maintained sites. However, even in my capital, so 3 kilometers north of my capital is a Roman town that was a provincial capital. They built a railroad over it. They put electrical, whatever, wire towers, I don't know how they're called, built buildings, they're building houses in it. So I'm asking in that scenario, what would be potentially the best approach to actually preserving something as a community?
Thank you. And yes, and that's a very helpful answer that you've given there. And a helpful question too, because what I want to highlight is this is a good example of the other cases there. So you're mentioning a particular case where there's very poor management that's being undertaken, and one of the aspects which the European Heritage Hub has done through its initiatives is to collect by having a hub, a central node to find best practice, that you may find that there are other places in Europe where that has occurred as well, and those sorts of relationships are between local communities and local governments too, and others who have helped to overcome that. So particularly, this is not to say that this is an answer, but in an opening way forward is that what something like the Heritage Hub would hope to do in those particular instances is to provide the necessary tools and instruments to overcome that sort of thing. So when you do have poor relationships, find other places that have also had poor relationships or managed to overcome those poor relationships and to get around that. So I'm not saying that that's a solution, but it's a possible way forward, and it's something that the hub very much hopes to facilitate.
Thank you for your answer.
Any other inputs?
Me,
Yeah, I have a question.
Maybe first Marco put the input and then we can continue with your question, Matteo. Is it okay? Yeah. Okay.
of course. Very briefly to Luca, I feel very strongly the story you're told, because it's one of the many, and it's all around Europe that it happens. Usually the public delegates to private entities when it on itself cannot sustain everything. So the public-private partnership, that's why they exist. If a country could perfectly manage all of its heritage, I don't think that would be a trending model currently. But it happens because, and you gave already the answer, small communities, small working groups can more easily manage heritage. So, but when the country, when the public is not able to fulfill its duties, I would say generally it's like in any other sector that maybe protest and advocacy could give some pressure to some specific aspects.
Thank you.
And Matteo, your question?
Yeah, my question is, how can we move heritage beyond like this kind of like growth mindset of like that heritage needs to be economically valuable, which is part of the heritage discourse that I at least perceive in European countries, which is part of like why rural heritage in Europe is ignored and why villages are allowed to become empty. How can we help communities challenge this heritage discourse to increase their negotiating power when it comes to this heritage, so they can protect themselves, for example, with the case that it was just discussed, from like extractivist forces that just don't care about protection of the heritage.
Yes, who wants to answer this? Any ideas? I think that question needs to be discovered for further, as I understand. Okay, Marco, you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I understood the question perfectly, but you say that rural or neglected heritage is not linked to its, let's say, to its economic value, if I understood well. The point,
I'm
of course,
saying
is
that there's heritage in the rural that is not even considered heritage by Europe or by the country they're in, unless that, for example, I think right now I'm thinking of the case in Galicia of Sabucedo, of a festival that they did there around wild horses, and that one specifically now gets support and is protected and everything, but it's a very specific case. Well, there's other towns that do the exact same thing but are completely abandoned, and yeah, because those towns were not able to gather the tourists around this heritage, so it doesn't matter anymore. And likewise, there is right now I'm in a cooperative that's restoring an old textile colony in Catalonia, and they're making housing cooperatives and food cooperatives here. But yeah, this housing and the fields that are worked here are part of the heritage of the village, but the village itself is tied to the industry that no longer exists. And the museum here is focused on the heritage of the factory, and the population of the village in 5 years will be gone, and the heritage is stuck in the past. It's not able to move to everything else that that the village has created. So the power of the heritage of the discourse is away from the people of the villages. So my question is, how do we increase the power of negotiation of local communities when their heritage is not valuable in an economic sense? It doesn't attract tourists, or not the type of amount of tourism that attracts a lot of money.
I can just respond to that there. So from what I understand, you're talking about industrial heritage in particular, or former use of other forms of economic heritage that's not being used. So when talking about the valorization of heritage as well, there's different sets of criteria that people would use. So it might not be heritage in a UNESCO sense as in it's worldwide, but if it's of value to the local community, then there is recognition of that. And there has been, for example, in the recent European Heritage Awards, it was last year, there's a lot of industrial heritage projects that were worked on and were given awards, and those are very much in the hands of the local community. So what I think to say is that it is, because again, its heritage is the model in the EU is one which is very much with the local communities itself, that if there is the initiative from the local communities to the local authorities, and there are visionaries, because there were at the European Heritage Awards, there were individual visionaries in groups and communities who were awarded for their work in this, so that there is a space to actually work on this further. So you are mentioning what I would to conclude on that is that there is space within there for the communities to gain that recognition, and that can be recognized at a much wider level. And often if you do get wider recognition within the sector and the cultural heritage sector, including such as the group for heritage youth in Europe, then that can lead further. So as is mentioned there in the link, it's just been put the European Heritage Awards with Europe and Nostra, a lot of industrial heritage, a lot of rural heritage there. And that does allow for the valorization of the sort of heritage that you've just mentioned there.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think since we are at the end of our time as well, we have to close the session. And thank you all for joining the debate, and for all your valuable insights and contributions to the discussion. Thank you to our speakers, Marco, Atakan, and Joshua once again. And we hope that today's exchange inspired everyone at some extent. And if you'd like to stay engaged with our community of Youth.Heritage.Europe and be part of our growing network, once again, we warmly invite you to become our member with two different options, as Sorna mentioned. And hope to see you around and continue our discussion at different events and different environments. Thank you all.
Thank you.
All, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.